I would like to invite you, dear viewer, to join me on vacation. We won't be journeying across the plains of Rohan to rest in the Golden Hall at Edoras, nor will we warp through hyperspace to settle on the verdant fields of Naboo, nor is this a mission trip to the poor and downtrodden of the Undercity of Zon. Instead, my friend, we are simply going to the beach. I will forever maintain that characters are far and away the most important part of a story. The plot springs from their decisions. Their choices portray the themes of the narrative, and we largely experience the world building through their eyes. Too many modern shows and movies focus on getting from point A to point B in the plot, and they shape the characters around that predetermined course of action, resulting in inconsistencies and contrivances galore. But the great stories, the ones that really matter, understand a character's place in the narrative is not merely to push the plot forward, but to act according to their character, to pursue their goals and agendas, to chase their ambitions and dreams like any real person would. Avatar understood this. That is why its writers were able to take one major, if not main character, one minor character, and two essentially bit roles and create an episode centered around their group dynamic that is as compelling and meaningful as any other chapter in the whole show. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this episode is a masterclass of subtlety and nuance akin to Better Call Saul or Succession, because this is, after all, a story written for kids, and so the characters have to speak quite plainly and openly. But that hardly means that the dialogue is stilted or unnatural. Quite the opposite. These characters are children themselves. So when Ty Lee explains how her desire to be unique led her to join the circus, or May reveals that her seemingly uncaring demeanor was due to her strict upbringing, one can hardly fault those monologues as being meaningless exposition. This is, quite simply, what teenagers do. They look within themselves and their pasts for explanations on why they feel and act as they do now. Not to mention that Avatar has self-discovery as a prominent theme, with every single one of its major characters going through such a journey. As Zuko Iroh says, "You have to look within yourself to save yourself from your other self. Only then will your true self reveal itself." When any of the four characters in The Beach speaks, he or she will often express a simple truth. Ty Lee loves attention. May doesn't understand Zuko's passionate nature. Azula is frustrated with her inability to attract a guy. And Zuko, of course, is angry. These are the truths that the children who watch this show will readily and easily understand. But underneath the surface, within the simple words that they speak, lies, for each character, a deeper truth. One that the adults will, hopefully, recognize, and one that perhaps the kids in the audience will intuit without even realizing it. Ty Lee is fiercely protective of her individuality, and yet still seeks the comfort of a family. Only now, as it was at the circus, it is a family that she has chosen. I mean, kind of. Azula did, shall we say, coerce her into joining her little hunting party. Point still stands, though, as Ty Lee is the one who seeks to be the peacemaker of their gang, who desperately wants them all to be friends. No doubt, breaking away from her sisters, from her family, came at a price, and so she now seeks to replace that hole in her heart. May does care about others, about what they think of her, but she has never learned how to express that love. Growing up as an only child in a family ordered toward her father's career goals, she never knew genuine, selfless love. Her parents' method of parenting was to satisfy her with whatever she asked for, as long as she complied with their demands. Such a transactional relationship would never allow unconditional love to flourish, and yet she yearns for such a love. Azula views everything as a contest. She could have picked any other spot on the beach to settle down, but of course she chose to stop a sandcastle and send children running and crying. In any given situation, Azula has an impulsive need to demonstrate that she is in charge, that she can and will not just lead or rule, but dominate. And so when she runs into an arena in which she turns out to be incompetent, that is, flirting, she sulks. Then insults Ty Lee's own natural ability, and then finally admits that she is jealous. Not jealous of the attention that results from Ty Lee's effortless charm, mind you, but rather of the ability itself. Azula wants, above all, to win. Getting Chan to ignore some other chick and pay attention to her is winning. Even after all the others clear their bad air by venting about their personal struggles and histories, Azula doesn't view it as genuine. "Those were wonderful performances, everyone," she quips, because she can't help but view even the most genuine of conversations as a contest, a struggle between wills that each have a particular goal which must be accomplished. Does she have a larger goal in this episode, though? Why was she, of all people, okay with being sent away from the palace while Ozai met with his generals? Why did she seek out Zuko after he had been booted from the party following his 6-inch punch incident? I believe the answer is simple. She wanted to get inside Zuko's head, to understand how he was feeling, to determine whether or not he was a threat to her ultimate goal of succeeding their father as Fire Lord. She needed Zuko as an ally in Ba Sing Se, but now she mostly just needs a scapegoat should Aang prove to not be fully dead. So when Zuko reveals his inner turmoil, we see Azula take pleasure in it, doubtless remembering her uncle's grief that resulted in Iroh being passed over in the succession line. And that confusion on Zuko's part is, of course, the main focal point of this episode, since his character arc is by far the most meaningful and impactful, not just now, but in the story as a whole. So why did the show spend all that time on the characters of Ty Lee, Mai, and Azula? Because the writers understood the value of framing. That is, Zuko does not exist in a vacuum. We, the viewers, benefit from seeing other characters whose histories bear some resemblance to that of Zuko in order to understand him better. It makes his character richer if we can compare and contrast it to those of his friends. The personal struggles of Mai and Ty Lee don't have a significant bearing on the plot as a whole, though their relationships with Azula absolutely do. But they matter here because they are part of a larger whole, forming the group dynamic that enables Zuko's eventual revelation. What led to said revelation? To the proclamation that Zuko is in fact angriest at himself. Well, we began the episode with Zuko griping about being sent away, once again finding himself on the outside, excluded from his father's war room, the place he desired to be for so long and so passionately, the place he had regained after his triumphant return from Ba Sing Se. Throughout this episode, then, we see Zuko clinging jealously to what he has, to Mai, trying to please her with gifts, which turns out to not work so well, specifically because, as a child, Mai was always given anything she wanted. She doesn't want Zuko to win her affection as her parents won her obedience. What does Mai respond to, then? Simple. Attention. Not in a cloying, needy way, but simply someone paying attention to her because he is genuinely interested in her. Such a desire is hard for her to express, and even more difficult for Zuko to perceive. The prince grew up in a quid pro quo world, where affection and respect were earned through actions and performance, not freely given out of genuine love. The conflict raging within him in this episode is in no small part due to the fact that he has done what was asked of him. He has been rewarded in turn, and yet he has not found the peace and satisfaction he assumed would accompany those rewards. In his frustration and anger, he seeks to throw away those things to which he had been holding so tightly. The memories of his childhood, his desire to be loved by his father, even the love he had for his mother. Zuko is ready and willing to burn it all down, to reject all facets of his life that had held meaning, because he simply doesn't know who he is. Which is, of course, why he is angry at himself. Zuko's character arc is one of changing purpose. Men desperately seek purpose and meaning from a relatively young age, and when given one will often pursue it regardless of the cost. That was Season 1 Zuko. Season 2 Zuko was still holding on to that purpose, but derived of most of the resources he had been using to hunt the Avatar, was instead forced to simply survive, and eventually found a new and better purpose in Ba Sing Se with Iroh, before his old yearnings were reawakened and he threw away that supposedly lesser purpose that he had found in the Jasmine Dragon. But with the goal of returning home a triumphant hero achieved, to what could Zuko turn his attention and energy now? Not a lot, as it turned out, due to the state of the war, so Zuko was given the opportunity to stop, rest, and think. Which leads us to where we are now, as the prince's betrayal of Iroh weighs heavier on his shoulders with each passing day, as he contemplates the morality of himself and his supposed enemies, thinking of Katara's compassionate willingness to heal his scar, as he wonders whether or not the Avatar really did die, as he asks simply, who am I now? No wonder he's so angry. Having your very identity stripped away, by your own actions no less, is unfathomable. That's probably not the right word. I suspect most of us can see at least a bit of ourselves in Zuko here. We have experienced times when we didn't know what to do, where to go, or who to be. We were frustrated at ourselves for being so incompetent and lost, so we lashed out at anyone around us, including, of course, ourselves. The answer to the question, what is wrong, is or should be, I am wrong. This is why Avatar has stood the test of time for nearly 20 years, and will for many decades yet. It speaks to something within all of us. Its fantastic world with totally not magical powers feels more real than our own in some ways, because the struggles are painted in such brilliant colors, beautifully displaying authentic and true wisdom, humility, and bravery, unhampered, at least eventually, by selfishness and pride. When you find yourself sitting with friends, cathartically conversing about your own trials and flaws, and you think, this is kind of like the beach, that is how you know this story is one that really matters. It does not remind us of real life, but real life reminds us of it. Because within these seemingly unassuming lines spoken by fictional teenagers on vacation, there are numerous universal and timeless truths. We want to be unique, inimitable, and unrepeatable, and yet we simultaneously need to belong. We want to be loved not for what we do, but because someone genuinely cares for our well-being, and we desire deeply and passionately to love in return. If we view every situation as a competition and every person as a piece on a chessboard, we will ultimately fail to win what cannot be won, the loyalty of freely given love. We may have suffered at the hands of others, but the only thing we can change is ourselves. When seeking to do good and avoid evil, the only choices I can control are my own. If I have failed, if I am lost, if I am angry, then I simply need to look within myself, save myself from my other self, and get my true self to reveal itself. I need to know who I am, who I want to be, and then find the road that will take me there. All of that and much more, but I'm keeping it brief, from barely 20 minutes of a TV show made for children, because kids deserve good stories. Perhaps they deserve the best ones, since their developing minds will be shaped and molded the most by the characters whose journeys they experience. That is what great character writing does. It takes us on an adventure, not merely through stunning locales or epic battles, but through the hearts and minds of the men and women, the boys and girls that we see on screen. In those character arcs, we find so many truths that we yearn for, even if we might not yet know it.